All right, let's talk about Chapter 11, Scene Size Up. Okay, real quick on Scene Size Up. The gist of this whole chapter is talking about sizing up the entire scene. What resources do we need? Is the scene safe? And really, that's probably the most important part of Scene Size Up is safety. So we need to make sure that we're safe. Law enforcement, if we need them, we get them on their way. Make sure they clear the scene. All right, things of that nature. All right, so what are some elements of Scene Size Up? Okay, checking scene safety, taking that standard precautions. We're talking about our PPE. Before COVID, pretty much the standard for PPE was we'd be wearing gloves on every call all the time. As far as masks and gowns and face shields and all that stuff, really this wasn't something that we use all that often. But those resources are always there for us when we do need it. Now, our standards are pretty much we wear a mask all the time when we're dealing with patients and on the scene of these calls. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? The other part of Scene Size Up would be noting the mechanism of injury or the nature of illness in the patient. Okay, are we responding to a car accident with ejection? The patient was thrown 50 feet from a car that had rolled over. Those mechanisms of injury are some things that we can kind of help point us in the right direction for what kind of injuries they might have. All right, determining the number of patients. How many patients are on the scene? Again, with those car accidents, it can be tricky. Was one person ejected and now they're off in a cornfield? Was there just one driver? So it's really important when we get there, we determine how many people we're dealing with. And at that point, we can say, we got 5 patients here. We need 4 more ambulances. All right, those things need to be taken care of really early on in the scene so that we can get the resources there as quickly as possible. All right, and deciding what additional resources may be necessary. So what kind of additional resources do you guys think that we might have available? I mean, that's something important for us to think about. Does our neighboring department, are we a BLS ambulance and our neighboring department has paramedics? Or is there a county medic stationed in our fire station? We have helicopters available. What's the weather like? Are they going to be able to fly? Police department, our neighboring department, they have a gator. We don't have a gator, and we need to go way back in the woods and pull somebody out. These are all things that we need to be thinking about. And that's kind of the good thing about the way the EMS system works is that we get dispatched to a call, and we have a little bit of time preparing to respond, responding to the call, getting on scene, sizing up the scene. We have time to kind of process what's going on. And any of you who have ever been in a car accident, just for example, before, or something happens where you have to call 911, when you're in that moment and these things happen right in front of you, you don't have that time to prepare. So that's the good thing about that time frame we have, because we can start thinking about these things. Okay, this is a rollover car accident. We should probably be thinking about the helicopter, multiple patients, scene safety. If we're on the highway, we're going to get smoked by passerby, because every time you turn those lights and sirens on, every person driving by, they're looking. They're not paying attention to what's going on in front of them. So if you're standing in a bad spot, you don't have your safety vest on, things of that nature, that can get us hurt. All right. The only predictable thing about emergencies is they're often unpredictable and can pose many dangers. No call is the same. No call is the same. You can have some that are similar, but everything's dynamic on every scene. And so we have to keep our heads on a swivel because that will keep us safe. So as you near the collision scene, we're listening for other emergency units. That's another thing that happens too, more so in the bigger cities. But you're responding to a call. another unit's responding to a call. You got a fire engine going to the call. You have the police going to a call. Okay, there's other emergency vehicles on the road. And if we're just blowing through red lights, then who knows? There could be a fire truck coming up the other side, and we don't know. So we always have to be paying attention. Okay, look for signs of a collision-related power outages. Okay, are you coming up on scene and it's nighttime? There's a car accident, and all of a sudden you notice the street lights are out, or all the houses, all the lights are out on all the houses you're on your way to. Okay. Observe the traffic flow. What's the traffic doing? Are they all backed up? Look for smoke in the direction of the collision scene. Okay, that might indicate that the car is on fire. All right, when you're within the sight of the scene, we want to look for clues indicating escaped hazardous materials. Is this a tractor trailer that has overturned and had some nasty stuff in the back it's leaking? Okay, look for collision victims on or near the road. Again, we need to determine our number of patients as soon as we get on scene so we can get those additional resources going. Okay, look for smoke not seen at a distance. Okay, as we're approaching the scene now, we definitely want to be looking around, try to figure out what happened. I'll tell you guys, I'm very, very rarely have I been to a car accident where I can figure out what happened. A serious car accident. And by that, what I mean is you come to these scenes. Sorry. You come up on these scenes, you got a car that's spun this way and this car spun that way, and there's skid marks here, and you're looking at the scene and you're like, I don't even know which direction each car was going or really what even happened here. All right. So just things for you guys to consider. Okay. Look for broken down utility poles and down wires, especially at night. We're not gonna be able to see those things all that well. Those high voltage lines can carry 30,000 volts on the upper lines of a utility pole. Those things come down and the ground's wet. That electricity can transfer through the ground. You can get electrocuted, not even coming up close to the scene. Okay, if you got down wires on a car, and the utility company is not there to confirm those wires are dead, you can't even go near the car. You might have to sit there and watch until the utility company comes and make sure that those lines are not hot. Okay. Be alert for people walking along the side of the road towards the collision scene. Okay. People want to go down. They will say, oh, I'm an EMT in a Cat County or something like that. I can help. Okay. There's a lot of times people, they want to help, and that's great. But they might be in the way as well. So be aware of that stuff as you're approaching the scene. Watch for signals of the police officers and other emergency service personnel. If you're not the first one on scene, the cops are there already. They're usually going to guide you. Sometimes they like to block the road so you can't get through. Doesn't happen all that often, but it does happen from time to time. So be aware of these things. You know, you're coming up in an ambulance. Cops aren't going to stop you from getting to the scene, of course. They're going to wave you through. But other people who are already on scene, they know what's going on a little better than you do. So they might be saying, hey, park the ambulance over here. Hurry up, come this way, that kind of stuff. All right, follow instructions of the person in charge. This is a paramilitary organization, meaning we have a command structure, and you should have somebody to report to at all times, unless you're the chief of the department. Okay. Down appropriate PPE, head protection, bunker coat, ANSI approved reflective vest over your coat. So we have these flashy turnout gear, a lot of us do, and it has reflective stuff on there. But unfortunately, that doesn't always meet the ANSI standard. And when we're on an accident on the road, we're supposed to be wearing a reflective vest over top of our coat even. So keep that in mind. You should have some safety vests in your ambulance or your engines. Okay. Establish a danger zone. Okay. Around the wreckage of every vehicle collision. There's some specific guidelines as far as how far back you want people to be. But it depends on the situation. Again, every situation is different. So when there's no apparent threats, we want to extend at least 50 feet in all directions. So we're just keeping people away from the scene. All right, bystanders. We don't want people just hanging out next to the smoking car that might explode here in a few minutes, okay? Even us, you know, if you were not prepared as a firefighter to be dealing with the car that's on fire, just stay back. As an EMS personnel, our job is to treat the patient, okay? Some of us are firefighters and EMTs, and of course it blends a little bit, but for the most part, let the people who know how to deal with that situation deal with it, and then you can get to your patient safely. All right. When fuel has spilled, for example, we want to be back about 100 feet in all directions. All right. And then, you know, and that's a little bit subjective too, just because if it's just fuel spilled and it's a small amount, yeah, okay, 100 feet's fine. If you got 13,000 gallons of gasoline pooled up in the middle of the road, or it's running down the road, we might have to extend that 100 feet. So again, follow directions from your chain of command, do what you're told to do. You know, once we get into the hazmat portion, we'll talk a little bit about this. We'll look at the ERG, and they'll show safe distances to different chemicals and all that kind of stuff. All right. When a vehicle's on fire, we want to stay at least 100 feet away. When wires are down, 1 full span of wires away from the pole to which broken wires are attached. That's a rule of thumb. So generally speaking, utility poles are spaced out evenly, and I don't know if it's 300 feet or something like that, but there's a distance. So if you look, you see power lines down, you look up at the pole, you can see where they're connected to the pole that they came off of, and then the next pole down where they're still connected. That's about how far away you want to stay from broken wires until the utility company. We don't determine if those wires are hot. Obviously, if they're jumping around on the ground and they're sparking, they are hot. But just because they're not doing that doesn't mean that they're not hot. So we have to have the utility company come and disconnect those lines and make sure that those lines are safe. All right, crime scenes and active violence. Always evaluate for a threat of violence. We're listening for loud noises, fighting, weapons, signs of alcohol or drug use, unusual silence, and knowledge of prior violence. So not always, of course, somebody has to go there first, but a lot of times when there is a problem at a certain address or a certain name, the dispatch can put an alert into the CAD so that when this address comes up, they will always send the police first. Now that doesn't happen every time there's violence, okay? And those dispatchers, I worked in dispatch for a while. Ron still works in dispatch. He's been there a long time. We have been through the training as a dispatcher, and we understand that they have protocols to ask lots and lots of questions to the caller. Now, sometimes people will call 911 and say, "I need an ambulance," and then they hang up the phone. And so we have to track them down, we have to find them. And a lot of times in those weird situations where we kind of have a gut feeling that something's not right, we will send the police first. And those are the calls where you'll get a text from I am responding, or you get dispatched as standby in your station to assist Stock County Sheriff's Department or whatever. Those are the calls that we're sending the cops to. The dispatch doesn't want to put the address out on your text or on the dispatch because a lot of people respond in their personal vehicles to the scene, and they want to make sure that that doesn't happen. They want to get the cops to get there first and secure the scene. All right, something for you guys to think about. Although any call can present a potential safety hazard, what types of calls might pose the highest threats of potential violence? Something for you guys to think about. Okay, standard precautions. We're talking about our BSI. All right. Always have PPE available. We have standards required gloves and gowns and all that kind of good stuff in our ambulance. It has to be in there by New York State law. Okay. At a minimum, we should be wearing gloves on every single call. Now, right now, like I said, times of COVID, we are wearing masks on all calls. That's a kind of a standard that's gone on top of previous standards. I don't know if this thing will ever be lifted as far as the mask thing goes, but for now we have to add that as well. Okay. So the most important thing, and this is part of your practical skills exam in the end, when we start getting into assessment and doing calls, is you start the scene, your practical skills station, and you have gloves on and the scene is safe. Those are the two most important things of any call. Okay. Nature of the call. So determining why EMS has been called. Why are we there? Okay. People call 911 for crazy reasons, as some of you know, and as some of you will see. Okay. Mechanism of injury, of course, we're talking about trauma calls. They fall down the stairs. Did they step off the curb and twist their ankle? Have they been in a serious car accident? Okay. What is the mechanism that caused that injury? And what types of injuries could be associated with that? Okay. Nature of illness is kind of the same idea, but it's more on a medical side. So, of course, when somebody calls for difficulty breathing, it's not because they fell down the stairs. There's no mechanism of injury. The nature of their illness is they're having trouble breathing, or they're having chest pain, or they're having a low blood sugar issue, things of that nature. Okay. But we always need to determine what is the nature of the call. What is the call? Well, why are we there? And it's either a mechanism of injury because it's trauma related, or it's a nature of illness. So we have to do that. Okay. Forces that caused the injury. Understanding the forces can predict injury patterns. Okay. Were they in a car accident? Was it a head-on collision? Okay. Were they rear-ended? A lot of times you get whiplash. So now we're concerned about neck and back issues. Okay. They can be very useful in predicting injuries associated with certain types of motor vehicle crashes. Okay. Well, look at that. What kind of injuries do you think this person would have? So as you walk up on scene and you see this picture, looks like it was probably rolled over. I'd say definitely probably some neck issues. When you get that kind of force rolling a vehicle over, your neck's twisted back and forth pretty good. Could be arm injuries, leg injuries, could have hit their knees on the dash and smashed them. Okay, lots of different things can happen. And there's a couple pictures coming up here in a few minutes. If they're not in this presentation, they are in your book. But so when we think about things, head-on collision, okay, up and over injury pattern or down and under injury pattern. Were they wearing their seatbelt? That's one of the most important things we can find out, because that can really help us determine what kind of injuries that they might have. All right, up and over meaning up and over the dash through the windshield pattern, or are they sliding down and under the steering wheel? Clues such as a deployed airbag may lead you to suspect certain types of injuries. Okay, was the force enough to set the airbags off? The doctors want to know this stuff. So when you bring that patient into the hospital, you'll say, airbag was deployed. Some like to see pictures. So if you have the ability to, it's not required, but if you take a couple pictures of the car and show it to the doctors when you get there, that's a helpful tool for them. All right. Clues such as a damaged windshield may lead you to suspect certain types of injuries. Okay, that looks like somebody's head cracked off the windshield. Okay, that's not good. Okay, rear end collisions, side impact, so like T-bones or rollovers, these are all different types of mechanisms. So we can look at the car, we can find out what happened, and then determine what kind of injuries they might have. Okay, rear impact, that's a really hard rear impact. Nice side impact here, right in the driver's side. Rollover. Okay, rotational impact collisions. Cars are struck, then spin. Initial impact often causes subsequent impacts. So they get rolling or spinning, they hit a tree, they hit another car. Maybe the car's coming the other direction that this car just got kicked into their lane. Okay, you're getting hit from all sides. All right, there can be very, very serious. All right, falls. We talk about what's a critical fall by definition. You can, I had a femur fracture once, and this lady stepped off. There's 3 steps height. So what is that? 23 inches or something like that height. She stepped just wrong and she actually broke her femur. It's not a common way to break your femur, but any type of injury like that, even what you think might be minor, can be serious. Okay, but by definition, the critical fall, and this will probably be a test question for you guys, adult is if adult falls more than 20 feet, or if a children under 15 years old falls more than 10 feet, or 2 to 3 times a child's height. These are all very subjective. Of course, there's kids that are 15 years old that are as tall as me. So that's kind of where all this stuff plays in, okay? Anatomically, we're all a little bit different. Kids grow at different rates. So, you know, if you see a fall between 10 and 20 feet, then that can be very serious. Okay, characteristics of a fall may provide valuable clues to the patient's injury. I don't know what happened to this guy. I don't see a ladder next to him. He fell from somewhere. I don't know. If there's a ladder on top of him, that could, or right next to him, it could probably indicate that he fell from the ladder. How tall is the ladder? Give you an idea of how high up he was. Things of that nature. All right, important factors in falls. What was the height? What was the surface they fell onto? What part of the patient hit the surface? Did they land on their head? Did they land on their leg? Okay. Did anything interrupt the fall? They hit something coming down. Okay. Penetrating trauma. Penetrating trauma, by definition, is an injury caused by an object that passes through the skin or other body tissue. Okay. Classified as by the velocity of the item that caused the injury. Okay. So we're talking about knife injuries and gunshots, things of that nature. Okay. Low velocity penetrating trauma would be knife injuries, because you are it only has as much velocity as a person is able to expel. All right, damage can be limited to the area penetrated, and there may be multiple wounds. So you get stabbed a whole bunch of times. Obviously, there's going to be multiple wounds, but likely there's not going to be areas other than where the knife hit injured. Whereas a gun could bounce around inside the body depending on the velocity, okay? So we're considering medium velocity to be handguns and shotguns, and high velocity rifles. It can be anywhere in the body. Damage directly from the projectile, and pressure-related damage or cavitation. Blunt force trauma, okay, is an injury that caused by a blow that strikes the body but does not penetrate the skin or other body tissues. Signs are often subtle and easily overlooked. Maintain an index of suspicion based on the mechanism of injury. So they get blasted in the face with a baseball bat. That'd be a blunt force trauma, okay? In the chest, things of that nature. That's all blunt force trauma. Nature of the illness. So we talked about mechanism of injury. Now we can talk a little bit about the nature of the illness. What was the reason the patient called the EMS? It's not always the patient that calls EMS. Sometimes it's a loved one or a bystander, and they don't even know what's going on. Say, hey, this guy's not acting right, okay? Well, it doesn't give us a lot of information, but sometimes that's what happens. To begin identifying the nature of a patient's illness during the scene size up, you must scan the entire scene. Okay. Actively look for any additional patients, such as pedestrians or cyclists. Okay, I don't know what happened here. If this guy got hit by a car. Okay. Information may be obtained from many sources. Okay, so who called 911 and why? It's kind of our go-to. We always go to the patient, make sure the patient's okay, but we want to know why we were called there in the first place. So if the patient called, he usually can tell you, hey, not feeling well. My knee hurts for the last 4 days. I need to go to the hospital. That happens. All right. Family members or bystanders, what's going on at the scene, right? Are there needles laying next to the person who's unresponsive on the ground there? Things of that nature. Excuse me. So how many patients do we have? do we have sufficient resources on hand to care for all those patients? Okay, we get there, we got 10 people exposed to some chemical, something or other. That's an MCI, multiple casualty incident. And that's something we'll learn about later in class, a little bit how to triage those patients, but that puts a serious strain on our resources. So, I mean, how many ambulances does your department have? We need to start calling in outside agencies to help us out. Okay, does a situation require specialized resources? Do we need the fire department? Those who will end up in just an EMS agency. Do we need the fire department? Do we need tech rescue team? Do we need a hazmat team? Real quick chapter review. Scene size up is the first part of the patient assessment process. It is important during scene size up to determine what, if any, threats there are, there may be to your own safety, and then the safety of others at the scene, then to take appropriate standard precautions, okay? So we get on scene, we make sure the scene's safe, we have our BSI on, and we can continue, okay? Next, it's important to determine the nature of the call by identifying the mechanism of injury or the nature of the patient's illness. Now, this is giving you a step-by-step process in how to do a patient assessment, okay? When you guys get your patient assessment sheets that you'll be tested on, the first block is the scene size up block, and this is giving you a step-by-step how to work your way through that checklist for testing purposes, okay? Finally, you must take into account the number of patients and other factors at the scene and determine if you will need additional help. So you're gonna go to the scene, you're gonna be, okay, I got my BSI on, scene is safe. Looks like we have one patient in a car accident, it's minor, I don't need any additional resources, and then you can start figuring out the rest of the assessment from there, okay? Determine what, if any, threats there may be to your own safety and to the safety of others at the scene. And again, take appropriate standard precautions. That's your BSI. All right. Scene size up is very dynamic, and I know I've already said this before, okay, but it's something we really need to remember. It's an ongoing process throughout the entire call, okay? On your check sheets that you'll get for testing, you're gonna see scene size ups first, primary assessment second, secondary assessments third, okay? So you're gonna work your way through the sheet as if it's a checklist and it's mechanical, and that's how textbook way of doing a patient assessment. But realistically, the scene size up portion is dynamic because you get to the scene and you're like, all right, scene safe. All right, we got no problems here in the house with the patient, okay? But now we're gonna move that patient. How are we gonna move the patient? All right, I mean, we'll learn about all this stuff, but there's other challenges all throughout the call, and all of those wrap right back into scene safety, your scene size up, okay? As you're walking the patient out to the ambulance, is there some crazy madman driving down the road and they're gonna run in the back of your ambulance as you're loading your patient, okay? It's a constant process. You always have to be thinking, what's going on, what's going around me, what's going on around me, and what could happen, okay? Always be paying attention to what's going on. Determine the nature of the call by identifying the mechanism of injury or the nature of the patient's illness. Determine the number of patients and additional resources necessary. Just a couple questions for you guys to consider. For each of these dangers, what actions must be taken to remain safe at a collision scene? Okay, so you respond to leaking gasoline. What are some precautions we need to take? Toxic or hazardous material spill. What kind of precautions? We want to get the hazmat team going, right? Stay back from the scene. Is the vehicle on fire? Are there power lines? All right, and what are common mechanism of injury patterns for the following situations? So head-on collision versus rear versus fall from a height. What types of injuries do you think could be associated with each of those situations? All right, and that's it for chapter 11, and we will get to work on the next section. All right, see you guys soon.